Good day, I'm Junior Researcher Adam Southgate, and today's lecture will be covering the Face Fear's false men. What does it mean to be human? Are we defined by our shape, our mind, or something more abstract, such as our soul? What if what was standing in front of you looked human, sounded human, believed itself to be human, and pleaded to you for its life, but you knew, despite what it may think, that it wasn't? Could you do what needed to be done? This is the reality today's entity confronts us with. But before I get too ahead of myself, I'd like to mention the Order's Discord to help keep our hunters organized. It's broken up into different roles based on rank and which Earth you belong to, if any. We run our contracts through this service, so I hope to see you all there. Details can be found in the description of this video. Now then, on to the Hunters update. Firstly, the Penavan Pond Cynrathyd Rhyddhau contract conclusion. As a quick recap, a squad of Halfa Wilt hunters had taken on a contract to eliminate an infestation of Fracti Pobble. This did not go well, with one of their number becoming severely injured and ingesting a Cynrathyd Rhyddhau parasite, sending him into a rage and beginning the transformation of his body. This is a common practice of the Earth, a way to take down an entity with them if they become too injured to survive, and one that is not endorsed by the Order. After contact with the whole team was lost, the Earth placed this bounty. The mission itself was taken on by the Hardy Boys team consisting of Jack and Lewis. Along with them was also a small group of the Admiral's men, with Sergeant Donovan taking point with the rest of his team providing support. Upon their arrival, they were met with both the local police, who had quarantined the area, and a small group of Halfa Wilt hunters who had posted the contract through the Order. Unfortunately, things did not begin well, as Master Hunter Sam Rees of the Earth Halfa Wilt informed the two teams that the main goal of this operation was to recover the parasite within their former member. They had listed the contract with ourselves as a simple elimination mission. Grudgingly, the two teams accepted this addition to the contract and began their search with the Halfa Wilt hunters. Sergeant Donovan, noting a nearby wind turbine, took up position at the top to attempt to spot any sign of the transformed hunter, while the others began a search around the pond itself. It wasn't long before two of the original Halfa Wilt hunters' bodies were found, one clearly cut down by a Fracti Pobble soldier, and the other seemingly torn and then crushed, most likely by the one of their number who ingested the parasite. At the same time, Donovan radioed in a sighting of movement from a nearby industrial site, too fast to be Cynrathyd Rhyddhau. The team, wanting to investigate, regrouped, with Donovan descending the wind turbine. As they drew closer to the industrial estate, the flashes of movement became even more apparent, sharp spikes of red. Donovan crept closer alone to confirm the sighting, where he spotted three Fracti Pobble soldiers acting erratically without the guidance of the rest of the hive, most likely wiped out by the Cynrathyd Rhyddhau. Realizing that they could not leave these entities alive, a plan was put forward by the Hardy Boys to use the alleyway between the two buildings as a choke point. They carefully set up hunters' bear traps, the teeth being made of abomination shard shells to slow the Fracti Pobble as they rushed through, then the hunters would open fire upon them. Some discussion began on how to draw the entities until Hunter Lewis drew a revolver and fired it into the air. The plan worked as intended, with the Fracti Pobble first slowed by the traps, then cut down by gunfire. Donovan chose to post one of his men, Liam, from his reserve group on the same wind turbine where he had been posted previously. Then the team continued, however quickly noticed that the three Halfa Wilt hunters had seemingly vanished. Before this could be discussed, Liam reported movement from a nearby tree line, and the team headed in that direction. It wasn't long before they picked up the trail of the Cynrathyd Rhyddhau, torn up animals and an unfortunate family on a caravan site. After reaching the woodland, Donovan, a scout primarily, headed in to locate the target, while the others waited at the edge. He found it a way in, sobbing to itself and staring at the blood on its skinless hands. Donovan, hoping to recover the parasite, began to draw a powerful tranquilizer, hoping to end this without too much bloodshed. The others, worried about Donovan, decided to head in slowly and quietly, arriving just in time to see him fire the tranq into the target. Sadly, both the rage and high temperatures of the Conrathid with High quickly denaturized the tranquilizer, and it flew into a bloodlust. Donovan, not noticing the team, quickly turned and ran right past them, radioing to them to retreat. However, it was far too late, and they engaged. The Hardy Boys, both Jack and Lewis, attempted to ping-pong the creature between them, firing into it, allowing it to charge at them, then the other would fire, drawing it to them. This strategy worked for a time until the beast locked on to Lewis. Rifle empty, he quickly drew a high-caliber handgun and emptied it right into the abdomen of the creature. Jack, realizing the situation, drew his halberd rifle and began to unload, hoping to draw its attention yet again, but to no avail as it rushed down at Lewis. The Conrathid with High threw out its meaty arm wildly, launching Lewis against a nearby tree, sending him then crashing into the ground. Thankfully, as Jack steadied another shot, Donovan and his team, which were in reserve, came crashing through the underbrush, weapons drawn and firing. Upon the ground, dazed and confused, Lewis reported a sighting of an odd man dressed in a white suit, simply watching the battle unfold, an unconcerned look on his face. One of Donovan's team, armed with an artifact shield, deflected a blow from the entity. However, frustrated by this, it grabbed the shield and split the man's head in two with its edge. Donovan, enraged by the loss of his team member and low on ammo, drew a hunting knife and slid down in front of it, slashing at its exposed muscle. The beast roared out in pain and reached up his arm to smash down, but as it did so, the arm vanished from its body, blood spurting from an open wound. Over the radio, an unfamiliar voice spoke out. "That should be all the help you need." At the same time, Lewis lost sight of the man in white, who we know to be the Admiral 1234. The team all opened fire, aiming for the creature's neck, attempting to destroy the parasite within, allowing the creature to succumb to its many wounds. As the final shot rang out, the beast collapsed in a heap upon the ground, blood pooling beneath it. The Ahalfa-willed hunters chose this moment to make their reappearance, and were not best pleased at the parasite's destruction. However, the Order considers this contract a great success. Secondly, we have finally managed to get some information from our captured Iron Cult member. We do not believe that he has been completely forthright with us. However, he has revealed to us that the Iron Cult has split into two distinct factions, the Old Guard and the Iron Dawn. Our captured individual is a member of the Old Guard, and he and his group are opposed to, as he puts it, the more radical elements within the Iron Dawn. From what it seems, the Old Guard consists of the original leadership and some of the more loyal soldiers, while the Iron Dawn and the majority are those who feel disgruntled by the slower approach of the old leadership. This new group is apparently far more extreme in their methods and responsible for much of what we have witnessed in the past few weeks, wanting to hasten the Iron God's ascension. The Old Guard see this as foolish, as they see the slow process as sculpting their god to fit the needs of humanity, and by rushing it, it could become something far worse than the problem they were trying to solve. Thankfully, the prisoner did reveal to us a possible site the Iron Dawn could be using as a base of operations, which has given us an idea. We believe, and the prisoner has agreed, that a small team of hunters along with our prisoner could infiltrate this site as Old Guard members wanting to join the Iron Dawn. There they could gather information that could be vital going forward. This is a high-risk assignment, with extraction being unlikely, so those taking on this contract should be aware of the danger, but by knowing what the group is up to, we will gain the ability to stop them. Those interested can apply for this bounty at their local order office, or they can contact me directly through the contract section of our Discord server, which is in the description of this video. The mimics of the Fey sphere are odd creatures to say the least. We do not believe they originated from the Fey sphere originally, and instead breached into it and over time adapted to it, then breaching into ours. Where true Fey are susceptible to cold iron, their flesh burning from contact with it, mimics show only mild discomfort from the substance. And unlike all true Fey, mimics show no magical ability of any kind, their transformations being far more rooted in biology than, say, a glamour. They appear to be creatures who exist under the same evolutionary laws as life within our sphere, however twisted by the bizarre environment that is the Fey sphere. We are unsure if this twisting was simple natural adaptation or due to the influence of a Fey who shaped them with their magic. However, we know that this change is still going on, with new mimics slowly evolving with time. Frighteningly, mimics appear to achieve these adaptations on a much shorter timescale than life within our sphere, being measured in thousands of years instead of millions. This has given us the ability to track these changes from preserved deceased specimens, allowing us to create a rough evolutionary tree. Today's entity, the false men, are one of the newest forms of mimic, only appearing in the last 400 years. Just as with the false hills, I feel it best to explain the false men by working through their life cycle. Deposited typically on a tree with good cover or below a rock with an overhang will be a cluster of jelly-like eggs, typically between 3 to 200. Over time, the outermost layer of these eggs will harden into a waxy substance to protect the young inside as they develop. These eggs can hatch in as short as 1 month after being deposited, however can also remain dormant indefinitely if the temperature is too cold or too dry. Once conditions are correct, typically warm and moist, the eggs will hatch, the waxy outside weakening and splitting open, depositing the young within. These beings, similar to the false hill's larval form, will slip free and begin to scatter in all directions. Unlike the false hill's larval form, the false men's larvae possess arms and legs to allow for easier locomotion. Along with this, they also possess a mouth and a fully functioning digestive system. Their main goal at this stage, and for quite some time to come, will be to grow their size, accumulating body mass ready for the next stage. They are born accomplished hunters, beginning their life eating insects, but quickly, as they grow, switching to small mammals. They do still utilize ambush tactics, however without the ability to mimic objects around them, they must get creative. Utilizing their 4 limbs, they will routinely scoop topsoil from the ground, rubbing it into their backs. Their skin here is semi-permeable, allowing the earth and even some plants to take root. Over time, this becomes an effective camouflage. Coupled with their strategy of burrowing their lower half into the earth, they become basically invisible. Here they lay in wait for any potential food to wander by, suddenly springing forth with their 2 front arms grabbing and ramming the prey into their mouths. As the weather cools, they dig themselves even deeper into the earth, entering a dormant state until the weather warms again. They will live this life for a minimum of 5 years, until they reach their maximum size, typically 3 meters in length. Once at the peak of this stage, they will begin to emanate a human-like call, specifically one of distress, as their aim is to draw a human victim. Once one is close enough, they will attack, as they have throughout their lives, shoveling the victim into their open mouth. They will endeavor to do this head first so that the victim's arms are restrained to their sides as they enter, making resistance more difficult. Once the victim has been devoured and digested, the false man will enter a new stage of life, the chrysalid stage. Similar to makeup as their original shell, a waxy paper-like structure, a cocoon will form around their body, sealing them completely within. This is where things become somewhat complicated, as the whole of the larva within the cocoon will dissolve into a liquid soup of cells, technically killing the original entity. These cells over time, roughly 2 years, will slowly reconstitute, forming back together in a whole new configuration. What emerges from the cocoon and digs its way out from beneath the earth will be an exact replica of the human victim at the point just before they were devoured. This person will have all the memories and emotions of the victim, fully believing itself to be them, but having no memory of the attack. At this point, they will usually attempt to find family and friends, who will be astonished at the sudden reappearance of the person they thought lost. The disappearance will, if not picked up by ourselves, be noted as a fugue state, the facsimile of the original person slowly integrating into their life. However, and at some distance from the home the not-quite person lives in, the corpses of unconnected people will be discovered, with large, ragged chunks torn from their bodies. This is the adult stage of the false men, but at this point it may be better to consider it as 2 separate entities. The body can be broken down into 2 distinct yet connected organisms. The first is that of an almost perfect copy of the original victim, even down to the DNA. It is not the original, them being long since digested, but rather a clone, and is completely unaware of the second being within its own body. The second is the true mimic, wired into the nervous system of the first, but requiring its own nutrients taken in through its separate and hidden mouth. The mimic part of the being is far closer to an animal in cognitive ability and behavior, however able to suppress the consciousness of the human part taking control when needed. It does this to hunt, attacking and devouring pieces of victims it uses the body to chase down. This can go undetected for decades, in which time the mimic part will always be looking for a suitable mate. The gender of the mimic is dependent on that of the human half. Once found, the male will impregnate the female and continue its normal lifestyle until death. The female, however, will, after taking control, find a suitable location to deposit the eggs, starting the cycle once again. Detection of the false men is incredibly difficult. As stated, when the human mind is in control, they are completely unaware of their true nature. As for the mimic mouth, or mouths, as there can be more than one, they can form almost anywhere on the body, but they do not change position after the fact. When closed, they simply look like faded scars, a thin seam along the skin. Unless a full body scan is used, it is only a matter of luck if one will be detected, the internal skeleton being almost identical to a normal human's except around the mimic's mouth, but even then it is still well hidden. The rest of the mimic's body lays safely within the human's and is all soft tissues, and as such will not show up on X-rays. Fascinatingly, the human copy part of the creature shows no reaction to cold iron, while the mimic part does show some mild reaction common to mimic species, implying that they are at least in some ways separate beings. This may give you some hope that these human copies could be saved, however this is not the case. While they are separate beings, they are linked in some fundamental ways, specifically through the nervous system, meaning that separation would leave both completely paralyzed at best. Along with the nervous system, the digestive tracts of both beings are also connected at the large intestines, meaning that while the mimic does not gain nutrition from what the human part eats, the human part disposes of the mimic's waste. We have, through testing, found some interesting aspects of this combination. When attempting to reveal a false man's true nature, the mimic part assumes control, suppressing the other's consciousness. The mimic will be hostile to all around, snapping in an animalistic manner. However, after being given enough time to calm, the human mind will resurface, however with no memory of the previous conversation. We believe that this is done via instinct rather than the mimic intentionally suppressing the truth. However, the effect is the same. The human half is unable to learn about its own nature. We think that the trigger for this effect is the cognitive patterns formed from the information, as even when reading about their nature, the same effect transpires. There has been some debate whether the human half of a false man is actually human at all. While they are genetically identical to the original victim, that person was digested, and this new person was created from the cells of the larval stage being. It falls into the realms of philosophy in a similar way to the ship of Theseus, that of if you replace each individual part of a ship, is it still the same ship? But how does one go about hunting a false man? Well, the first hurdle is locating the target. The gamekeepers can establish a general area based on the pattern of victims, a distinct ring of bodies around the general area. This still leaves identifying the actual false man. An easy first step, once the general area has been identified, will be to check the police records for disappearances and sudden returns. This will give you a short list of individuals to investigate. Next, you will need to confirm which of these people is the false man by conducting a period of observation. You're specifically waiting for it to make an attack on a civilian, however you will, once you believe it is hunting, take the place of said civilian. Now, as for the confrontation, there are two schools of thought on this matter. The first involves approaching in numbers. The false men are cautious hunters, and as such, the mimic will allow the human mind to resurface in an attempt to hide its true nature. This approach does have a rather large downside of essentially executing an at least mostly human who has no idea what's going on. They will beg and plead for their lives, having no idea why you're doing this. But it is by far the safest method for the hunters. The second approach involves engaging while continuously shouting out the true nature of the false man so that it keeps the human mind suppressed. The entity will attempt to fight against you with all it has, however, this is not the kind of fight it is adapted for, and as such it will go down relatively easily, especially if kept at a distance. You do not need to worry about destroying the mimic itself, as if the human half dies, so too does the mimic, so standard firearms are very effective. The main threat these creatures pose is to those alone and unsuspecting, or those who attempt to face them in melee. When faced with an armed and ready opponent attacking at range, they have no real answer. This does not mean you can be complacent, however, as the mimic's jaws and teeth are capable of biting clear through skin, muscle and bone, and through testing we know they can even take chunks out of steel. The false men open up some uncomfortable questions on the nature of humanity. The human half, though created within the chrysalis, fully believes themselves to be human, and for the most part they are indeed correct. All DNA testing does identify them as such, however, they did not begin as human. They were not birthed from a mother, so where should they be placed? As a person, a clone, or an entity masquerading? I believe this is a question that is too big for myself, but I'd love to hear your opinions on the matter. But that will be all for today. Please like, comment and subscribe. With Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom. Thank you.